Winter will eventually get here. It always does. And I want to talk about how to protect some of your garden plants. Do I need to cover strawberry beds? And the answer is yes, you do need to protect your strawberry beds. You want to apply straw mulch on the strawberry bed after a few hard freezes. And this is because you want the plants to first acclimate to the cold. The mulch that you apply is going to protect the crown of the plant. And we know through research that plants can be killed at 15 degrees. So it is important to cover your strawberry beds to protect them from freezing and being killed. Well, what about garlic? Should you mulch your garlic beds? Well, it kind of depends. So there have been years when I have not mulched my garlic beds up here in the icebox of Missouri in Kirksville, and they have produced fine the following year. Now, when they do come up, and if you plant them in September, October, usually by November, you have about an inch or two of growth, and that will turn yellow and brown from cold damage. And then the following year in the spring, they will produce, they'll leaf out again and they'll produce just fine. But I do like to cover them. And the photo you see at the top there, that is a high tunnel on the campus of Truman State University. And they planted garlic bulbs in that high tunnel, and they do mulch their garlic beds, even though they are protected in a high tunnel. Below that, you see some raised beds where garlic has been planted, and those have been covered with straw. So even though I said I don't always cover them, in recent years I have, and I'm going to this year. And so, yeah, if you live in northern Missouri, we'd probably recommend that you do it to protect the foliage that has come up. If you live in southern Missouri, that may be up to you whether you want to do that or not. It's not a bad idea. And the reason is because the ground goes through freeze-thaw cycles. And if you apply the straw mulch, it does help keep the soil temperature more consistent. And then that helps the roots of the garlic continue to grow into the winter, and it helps prevent heaving. So you may have had issues with heaving your garlic bulbs up out of the soil. And by protecting them with a layer of straw mulch, you're going to have less heaving. It will also help keep nutrients in the soil and help prevent leaching. So these are all reasons why you would want to apply straw mulch to your garlic beds. But what about bulb beds like tulips, daffodils, hyacinths that you may have planted this fall? Well, bulb beds do not have to be covered, but I think it's a good idea. And they can be covered with evergreen branches, straw, or other types of organic material to help prevent heaving. And I have had bulbs heave up out of the soil. And by placing a layer of mulch around those bulbs, that will help prevent the heaving. It will help insulate the soil and keep the temperature more constant. And the flowers you see in this photo are in an island bed in my yard, and I just use a bark mulch around these. I have used evergreen branches in some other beds I have. So take advantage of your pine trees if you have some in your yard and cut some branches and lay them over your beds. Or like I said, you could use straw or the wood chips to help protect your bulb beds. But you don't have to do it. If you don't get around to it, don't think that, oh, my bulbs aren't going to come up. They're not going to make it, because they usually do. But also remember that moles are out there and they often like tulips as a food source. So there's a few reasons why bulbs don't always bloom, moles being one of the reasons. So it's kind of up to you whether you want to mulch bulbs or not, but I tend to do that. What about rhubarb? Well, I just planted a rhubarb plant this spring, and I am going to protect it. And if you live in the northern part of the state, we do recommend protecting rhubarb, especially newly planted plants, young plants. And there are gardeners out there that will say, I never put mulch around my rhubarb plants, and they are just fine. They come out of winter, no problem. They grow, they produce. And still, we recommend putting mulch around young plants. So place 4 to 6 inches of straw mulch or shredded leaves, can also be grass clippings, around the crown of the rhubarb plant in late fall after several nights of freezing temperatures. And if you have rhubarb in a pot, you're not going to want to leave it outside because it can freeze. So bring your rhubarb that's in a pot under cover for the winter. It can be a garage, or it can be brought into a shed or a barn. and then still place that 4 to 6 inches of straw around the crown of the base of the plant. For the plants outdoors that you have in the ground, you want to pull that mulch away when new growth starts to show in early spring. And if you live in the far southern parts of Missouri, you may not need to mulch your rhubarb. And if you have a question, you're down the Boot Hill or near Joplin, that area, you might want to reach out to your horticulture specialist and see what they think. But what about my asparagus? Should I mulch my asparagus bed? This is a pretty common question this time of year. And we do recommend mulching new or young asparagus beds. And again, you want to use straw. 4 to 6 inches of straw can be placed. You can cut down your fronds after they have turned brown and yellow, or you can tuck the straw in between the fronds. Now, established beds do not need to be covered. I have a bed that's probably 15 years old. I didn't plant it. It was there when I purchased the place, and it's an older bed, and I do not put straw on it. I've never put straw on it since I've lived there, but I do not cut the fronds back. I just let them be. And in the springtime is when I will cut them back, or some people burn them. And by leaving them on the plant, you are giving that plant or the roots, the crown, protection. And often when it snows and we get several inches of snow, it will weight that down and they will fall over and provide a nice insulation for your rhubarb roots and crowns. So don't cut back the fronds or ferns on your asparagus on an established bed. Just wait till late February into March before you cut them down or burn them. But on the new plants, research does show that it probably should be mulched with straw to protect them, as they are getting established. And what about trees? What about my new trees? I just planted a tree this spring. Should I wrap it? Should I not wrap it? Well, you do want to wrap it if it is a light-barked, thin-barked tree. A lot of our non-native trees have thin bark or light-colored bark. Native trees do not need to be wrapped. So a native tree, like the oak trees, we do not wrap. They have dark-colored bark. They're hardy. They're adapted to the weather. So you don't need to wrap your native trees. But we do recommend wrapping fruit trees, maple trees, and there are some native maple trees, but we do recommend wrapping crab apples, especially if you live up here in the northern part of the state where it gets really cold. Last year, we had -18 one night. We had a couple nights of -14. And when it gets that cold and 3 days later, it's 60 degrees, that's hard on those trees and they will split open. And that will happen on the southwest side of the tree with the sun beat down during the day, warmed it up. It got cold at night. It froze. And so that freeze-thaw cycle, will split those trees open. And that is called southwest injury when it occurs on that southwest side of the tree. So we're trying to protect it from that. And we're doing it by putting a wrap on. And you can buy these wraps, which are light color. They can be white or tan, like you see in the photos. Those can be purchased at a local farm store, garden center, local nursery. So check those out, and you should be able to find them. They are typically in a round like wrap, and you can get them for a few dollars. And then you want to place that on late November or early December. So we're coming into the time where you need to start wrapping those trees that need wrapped, and you will need to have some kind of tape. I use duct tape, as you can see here. I tape it off at the bottom, tape it off at the top to keep it from falling off. And I've also, in the past, used white corrugated tubing around the tree wrap because one winter I went out here at the Extension Center and a couple of the trees had rips they were torn into and bites into the bark. So some critter had tore into the wrap and ate away at some of that bark. So after that, I started putting the white corrugated tubing over the tree wrap, which gave it added protection. So you might want to consider that if you live in an area where you have a lot of rabbits or deer or critters that might want to come feast on your trees during the winter months. And then we don't want to forget to remove those wraps in March. So as we go into spring, it's starting to warm up. We want to be sure we get those wraps off because moisture can get down in there, insects can get down in there, and that can do damage to your tree. So don't forget to take these wraps off if you put them on. And that's all I have on protecting plants for winter. If anybody has any questions, please reach out to us and we'll be glad to answer your questions.